I still remember the first time I set foot in Merseyside. The air felt heavier, almost charged with something unseen. Locals spoke in whispers about places where footsteps echo without a walker, where laughter fades into screams and shadows seem to move on their own. I didn't believe any of it. Not until I saw it, with my own eyes. From abandoned caverns to centuries-old hotels, Merseyside hides stories too chilling to ignore. So tonight, I'll take you inside the 5 most haunted corners of this region. But be warned, once you know these stories, you'll never see Merseyside the same way again. If you love exploring real haunted places and true horror stories, make sure to subscribe, because the next story might just keep you up tonight. Speke Hall, Liverpool. I visited Speke Hall one cold evening in late October during one of the official ghost tours. The National Trust keeps the property well maintained, but the moment I stepped inside, I could feel the age in the air. The smell of old oak, candle wax, and damp stone filled every corridor. The guide asked us to stay together. "The halls get confusing at night," she warned, smiling lightly. Speke Hall isn't just an old Tudor mansion. It's one of the oldest timber-framed houses in England. Built in the 1500s by the Norris family, it's seen more than 4 centuries of births, deaths, and heartbreaks. Locals believe some of those emotions never left. Our group of 10 began the walk through the Great Hall. It was grand, but strangely quiet. The guide pointed to the gallery above and said, "People report hearing footsteps up there when no one's allowed on that floor after dark." Just as she said it, I heard it too. Faint steps, slow, steady. Everyone turned their heads upward, but the space was empty. The guide didn't stop. She simply said, "That happens almost every week." Her calm tone made it scarier. Next, we entered the oak parlor. The guide told us about Lady Mary Norris, the last of the Norris family to live here before marrying Lord Sidney Beauclerk in 1736. After her husband gambled away most of her fortune, she returned here heartbroken. Some say her spirit still walks the hallways, unable to leave the home she once loved. While she spoke, one of the visitors, a middle-aged man, raised his hand and said softly, "Is anyone else feeling cold around their legs?" I looked down. I couldn't see anything unusual, but the temperature around my knees had suddenly dropped. The woman beside me gasped, "It's freezing here!" The guide nodded and said, "That's the common spot where people feel it, right beside the fireplace, even when it's not lit." I'm not someone who believes easily, but I could feel something strange. It wasn't fear, just an uncomfortable pressure in the chest, like the air was heavier there. We moved upstairs to the corridor, known for its shadows. Several visitors stopped to take photos. One woman whispered, "Did anyone see that?" She pointed toward the end of the hallway, where the light had flickered for just a second. No sound, no movement. Just a brief dark shape that blocked the glow of the lanterns. When she showed her phone later, the picture had a faint mist near the doorframe. The guide said gently, "That door leads to Lady Mary's room." When we finally entered the bedroom, it felt different. The wooden floorboards creaked with every step. The guide explained that staff often hear a light knock on the wall here after closing hours, though they've never found the cause. She added, "We don't call them ghosts. We say the hall remembers." As the tour ended, everyone gathered near the main exit. I turned around for one last look at the Great Hall. The large wooden beams cast deep shadows across the walls. For a moment I thought I heard soft footsteps again. Just a few, fading quickly. I didn't mention it. Somehow, I felt the place didn't want to scare anyone. It just wanted to be noticed. Walking out into the cold night air, I looked back at the mansion's dark windows. It stood there silently, a beautiful piece of history that still breathes. Whether the sounds were echoes of old wood, shifting temperature, or something unseen, I can't say. But I do know this: Speke Hall doesn't feel empty. It feels alive. Newsham Park Hospital and Orphanage, Liverpool. Still remember that night in Liverpool, like it happened yesterday. The air was heavy with the smell of damp plaster and rust, and the tall windows of Newsham Park Hospital looked like dark eyes watching us arrive. Our group of 10 people stood outside the old Victorian building, flashlights in hand, shivering partly from cold, partly from nerves. The guide, a middle-aged man named Peter, told us quietly, "If you start feeling dizzy or heavy, don't panic. This place reacts to energy." He had once worked here in the 1990s, when the hospital still treated psychiatric patients. His voice had a tremor, not for effect, but as if the memories still unsettled him. The start of the investigation. The first place we entered was the main corridor, a long, echoing hallway lined with peeling blue paint. Every footstep bounced back twice, like someone else was walking beside you. The torchlight hit old signs still hanging. Ward B, Children's Dormitory, Stairwell Access. It wasn't long before I felt the temperature drop. At first, I thought it was just the draft from broken windows. But when I checked the EMF reader provided by the team, the light spiked red, right where the chill was strongest. Peter whispered, "That spot's near the old orphan dorms. Some visitors hear giggles there." Nobody laughed after that. The children's dormitory. The dorm was filled with rows of metal beds, all rusted and twisted. You could almost feel the loneliness in the air, like the walls had soaked up years of silence and crying. Someone in our group, a woman named Claire, said she heard what sounded like light tapping from the far wall. It wasn't pipes. It was too slow, too deliberate. Tap, pause, tap, tap. Peter didn't say a word, just looked at the floor for a moment. Later, he told us this was called the Naughty Boys Corridor, where children were locked alone for punishment. That part hit me harder than any ghost story ever could. Upstairs in the psychiatric wing, moved to the upper floor. The psychiatric ward that closed in 1997. The walls were a patchwork of peeling paint, and the smell of mildew was overwhelming. The atmosphere here was different. Heavy, almost suffocating. I kept noticing my breath in the beam of the flashlight, even though it wasn't that cold. Then out of nowhere, the EMF reader flickered again. Not a huge spike, just one faint flash. Peter calmly said, "Sometimes they just pass through. It doesn't mean they want to scare you." It was strange how his calm made everything worse, because that's when I realized he wasn't surprised. The staircase moment on our way down the main staircase, the same one the orphans used during morning inspections. The light from my torch caught what looked like a small handprint on the dust-covered railing. Too small to be an adult's, no one touched it. We all just stared. Peter said softly, "That's been there since last winter. It never fades." That sentence alone stayed with me more than anything paranormal that night. The end of the night, we ended our visit in the assembly hall, once used for prayers and morning gatherings. It was nearly 3 a.m. Peter asked us to stand quietly for a moment before leaving, to feel what they left behind. In that silence, I didn't hear giggles or footsteps, but I did feel something. A deep sadness that words can't describe. It wasn't fear anymore. It was empathy for the orphans who grew up without families, for the patients who were forgotten when the hospital shut down. When we finally stepped outside, the air felt lighter. The hospital loomed behind us, empty, broken, but still alive in a way I couldn't explain. That night changed how I looked at haunted places. It's not just about ghosts, sometimes. It's about the memories that refuse to fade, even when the walls themselves start to crumble. 44. Penny Lane, Liverpool. When people think of Penny Lane, they picture the Beatles, the cheerful street signs, cafes, and the song that made it world famous. But hidden behind that friendly face is a much darker story, one that most tourists never hear. Locals in South Liverpool still whisper about. Number 44, a modest building standing quietly among the modern shops and passing buses. It doesn't look frightening at all, yet for decades the house has carried a reputation that makes delivery drivers avoid it after dark. The uneasy beginning, the story of 44 Penny Lane first appeared in the Liverpool Echo. During the early 1970s, residents living nearby complained about strange banging and footsteps coming from the property, even though it had been empty at the time. Neighbors said lights would flicker on by themselves, and people walking past late at night reported hearing a child crying from inside. Police were called more than once, but every time they entered, the place was silent. One constable later admitted, it felt colder than outside, like walking into a cellar, even upstairs. The printing shop years in the late 1980s. Part of the house was converted into a small printing shop. The new owners hoped to forget the old rumors, but they didn't last long. Workers said that tools disappeared overnight and reappeared in locked rooms. One apprentice described hearing paper trays crash when no one was near them. A repairman who worked there told the Liverpool Daily Post that he once saw a shape of a young girl in the reflection of the front window, but no one was behind him. He left halfway through the job and refused to return. By the mid-1990s, the printing business closed. The owners never publicly spoke about the reason, but locals noticed that every time a new tenant moved in, the place went vacant again within months. The poltergeist theory, by 2000, ghost hunting groups had started visiting Penny Lane. Among them was Liverpool Paranormal Society, who recorded unexplained footsteps, tapping, and whispers during a 2003 investigation. Their report, now archived online, described strong EMF, electromagnetic readings near the staircase, even when the power supply was disconnected. One investigator wrote, "It felt like a young presence, playful at first, then suddenly angry when we asked questions about family. Locals began calling the spirit the little girl of Penny Lane. Nobody knows her name, but several theories link her to a tragic accident that supposedly happened nearby during the war years, when a small child was hit by debris during a bombing raid. Whether true or not, many believe that her restless energy stayed inside number 44 modern-day encounters today. 44. Penny Lane looks ordinary again, freshly painted, sometimes used for short-term offices. But talk to anyone who has worked there, and the same details come up. Doors unlocking themselves, papers scattering, and the feeling that someone is standing just behind you when you work alone. In 2018, a local vlogger filmed a short Beatles trail video passing the property. In one frame, a faint figure appears reflected in the top floor window, though the building was closed and dark. The clip went viral on Reddit under the tag "Haunted Liverpool." And people still debate whether it was a camera glitch or proof of the haunting that refuses to fade. Why people still visit for most visitors, Penny Lane is joy and nostalgia. But for paranormal researchers, 44, Penny Lane remains one of Liverpool's quiet mysteries. It's not a tourist attraction, and there's no sign marking it haunted. Yet nearly every ghost tour guide in the city includes it in their stories. They say that if you walk past after midnight, when the traffic has stopped and the lights are low, you might hear a faint knocking from the back door, like someone small is trying to come inside. After visiting the street myself, I understood why this story endures. Penny Lane feels alive, cheerful, musical, warm. Yet one building holds a coldness that doesn't belong. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, number 44 carries the weight of too many consistent experiences to ignore. It's a reminder that even in the most famous, friendly corners of the world, the past sometimes refuses to stay silent. The Adelphi Hotel, Liverpool. The Adelphi Hotel, the haunted heart of Liverpool. The first time I stepped into the Adelphi Hotel, I wasn't hunting ghosts. I was just another visitor, drawn by its old-world beauty. The grand chandeliers, the marble stairs, the smell of polished wood mixed with history. But what I didn't realize then was that this building remembers everything. The laughter, the deaths, the goodbyes, and sometimes it refuses to let them go. The history that never left standing proudly since 1914. The Adelphi once hosted kings, politicians, and film stars. During its golden years, it was called the most luxurious hotel in Britain outside London. But behind that glamour, tragedy always walked close. In the 1940s, the hotel was used as a meeting point for soldiers before they left for war. Some never returned. Staff would later claim that certain rooms, especially room 105 and the Sefton suite, still echo with the sound of boots and soft knocks on doors when no one is inside. One former manager once said to Liverpool Echo, "Every hotel has guests that don't check out. But here, some never did." My visit begins. I stayed at the Adelphi in 2023, filming a short travel piece about Liverpool's haunted locations. The reception area looked innocent. People chatting, luggage rolling, laughter around the bar. But the moment I stepped into the corridor on the 3rd floor, everything felt different. It was quiet, too quiet. The air smelled old, a strange mix of dust and perfume, like someone had sprayed it decades ago. I remember feeling a chill, even though the heating was on. My room, room 318, was near the old Sefton suite, where countless paranormal claims have been made. As soon as I unlocked the door, the light flickered once, then steadied. I laughed nervously, thinking it was just old wiring, but deep inside, I felt watched. At around 1:40 a.m., I woke up suddenly. Not because of a sound, but because of silence. That kind of silence that presses on your chest. Then, from the far end of the corridor, came a faint dragging noise, like footsteps sliding slowly on carpet. I opened the door and peeked out. No one. But I could hear whispers. Soft, like two people having a conversation behind a closed door. It came from room 105, the same one mentioned in the hotel's ghost reports. I froze. The whispers stopped the moment I moved closer. Then, the door handle rattled. That single moment felt endless. My heart was pounding so hard, I could hear it echo in my ears. What the staff told me. The next morning, I went downstairs and mentioned what I'd heard to a night porter. an elderly man named George. He smiled in a way that told me he'd heard this before. "You're not the first, lad," he said. "That corridor's busy even when it's empty. There's a young woman we call the Bride. Died here in the 1930s. She's been seen walking near room 108 in a white dress, still waiting for her groom." I asked if anyone ever tried to investigate. Nodded, "Plenty have tried, but you can't catch what doesn't belong here." Later, I checked the local archives. There really was a report from the 1930s. A bride named Eleanor, found dead in her room after her fiancé never arrived for their wedding. The case was ruled suicide. Since then, several guests have reported seeing a woman standing by their bed, whispering he never came. The elevator moment that night. While leaving to film the lobby, I took the lift from the 3rd floor. It stopped midway, between the 2nd and ground floor. Lights dimmed, and for about 10 seconds, the elevator was filled with the faint scent of flowers. Roses, old and dry. When the doors finally opened, no one was there. But the floor indicator flashed 3 again, as if someone had called it back up. I didn't return to my room alone that night. Why it feels so real? Locals say the Adelphi is alive. Not with guests, but with memories. Many paranormal investigators have recorded strange phenomena here. Unexplained cold spots, footsteps, and whispers. Even the most haunted UK TV team filmed an episode inside the hotel in 2001, capturing knocks and voices that seemed to respond to questions. When I left the next morning, I looked back at the grand lobby. Sunlight pouring through stained glass. It was beautiful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in those upper rooms, someone was still waiting. For love, for life, or for peace. I don't know if ghosts are real, but I know what I felt. Inside, the Adelphi wasn't just imagination. Maybe it's the weight of history. Maybe it's something else. But one thing is certain. This hotel remembers everything, and it makes sure you do too. Crank Caverns, St. Helens, Merseyside. Crank Caverns, the lost echoes beneath St. Helens. The first time I heard about Crank Caverns, I thought it was just another abandoned quarry. Old, empty, and forgotten. Locals said it was haunted, but I didn't believe it. It wasn't until I went there myself that I understood why people say the silence inside isn't just silence. It's listening. The forgotten history. Beneath the hills crank. Caverns lie just outside St. Helens, hidden behind overgrown paths and quiet trees. They were once part of the Rainford Delph quarry, carved out in the 1700s. Later, during World War II, parts of the tunnels were rumored to be used for military storage and children's sheltering during bomb raids. That mix of history, industry, war, fear, gives the place an energy that feels unfinished. But locals tell darker stories. Some say monks once used the tunnels for rituals. Others whisper about children who entered and never came out. I used to think those were just tales. Until the night I went, exploring with 2 friends in 2022. Entering the caverns, we reached the site just before sunset. The air was damp, and the smell of moss and cold stone hit me the moment we stepped in. There was no wind, yet the trees above swayed gently, like they were warning us to leave. The entrance was narrow, half hidden by ivy. When my flashlight first hit the walls, I saw marks, hundreds of them. Some looked like old tool cuts, but others were just lines and crosses, carved deep as if someone had been counting days. We laughed nervously, pretending not to care. But deep inside, I felt uneasy. like we were being counted too. About 20 minutes in, we reached a wider chamber, what looked like the old sandstone extraction pit. That's when it happened. A whistle, short, sharp, and close, echoed from the tunnel behind us. We froze. Probably air pressure, my friend Mark whispered. But there was no wind in the caverns, no airflow at all. And then came the second sound, a soft tap against the wall, like someone dragging a stone slowly. When my light swung toward the sound, there was nothing but shadows and water dripping from the ceiling. That was the first time I felt real fear. The markings in the dark, we decided to keep going. Stupid, I know. About 50 meters deeper, the air turned colder, and our breath began to fog. I noticed something strange on the right-hand wall. A series of handprints, smaller than adult hands, maybe a child's size. The stone was damp, but the prints were dry, as if pressed just moments ago. My heart started pounding. We tried taking a photo, but the phone camera glitched. First blurry, then black. Mark's phone shut off completely, even though it had 60% battery a minute earlier. That's when I remembered what an old man in a St. Helens pub had told me earlier that week. If you go into crank after dark, never call out loud. Sometimes the caverns answer back. We turned back toward the entrance, but the tunnels seemed different, narrower, almost like the walls had shifted. At one point, I called out, "Mark!" Just to make sure he was behind me, and I swear on my life, the echo that came back wasn't my voice. It was higher, like a child's, soft, mocking. It repeated my name twice, but slower. Mark! For a moment, none of us moved. We just listened. Then from the darkness behind, we heard the faint sound of footsteps splashing in the puddles, getting closer, then stopping. We ran, escaping the caverns. When we finally reached the entrance, the night sky never looked so beautiful. We didn't speak until we got back to the car. Even then, it felt like something followed us out. That strange heaviness in the chest that doesn't go away. Later, I searched for any real accounts about the caverns. Turns out, many visitors report childlike voices, cold pockets of air, and camera malfunctions in the same chamber we'd reached. Some paranormal teams even recorded EVPs, whispering stay and no light, believed to be connected to children who hid there during what and never returned after a collapse. I've visited many haunted places, but Crank Caverns feels different. It's not about ghosts that want to scare you. It's about memories that never left. When you stand there, surrounded by stone carved centuries ago, you realize this place doesn't need stories. It already has too many. Every echo in those tunnels isn't random. Somewhere deep inside, someone's still calling out, hoping someone finally answers back.